the quarterback matchup isn't getting spoken on very often. And I don't really know why that is. But we've talked about D'Amico and McVay. We've even talked about McVay and Caley. We've talked about the O-line versus the D-line. But we really haven't talked a lot about CJ Stroud versus Matthew Stafford, which is where I want to start. And I want to get into the matchups that perhaps the Texans have the advantage and disadvantage in. But let's hear from CJ Stroud. We know that he has a lot of love for Matthew Stafford. This is courtesy of Jonathan Alexander of the Houston Chronicle. This was last year during joint practices. This is CJ Stroud just talking about his admiration for the quarterback who will be on the opposite sidelines on Saturday.
What is in particular about Matt Stafford that really caught your eye? When was the first time you really noticed his game, and what is it that you respect most about it?
The first thing that jumps off for me from him is just his toughness. And he's tough as hell. Like, I remember watching the mic'd up and he broke his shoulder or something. We were like, man, he finished the drive and, his shoulders ended falling into place. And, I just respect that, 'cause it's not easy. And, just how he manipulates guys with his eyes, his drops, his arm angles. And I've been a fan of Matt Stafford for a long time. And I wasn't trying to be like a fanboy today, but I asked him a lot of questions. Just try to just learn. And he was really honest with me and wasn't like mean, which I appreciate. So definitely a huge fan of his, one of my favorite quarterbacks of all time. Because I share a feel with him was dope.
All right. So there you go. So he has a lot of respect for Matthew Stafford. If you look at the QB ratings, just on random lists, and the lists that we always look at are PFF. And I know PFF is polarizing. I think you just have to take it with a grain of salt. If you follow it enough, you can figure out what the woes are. They're not going to know your squad as well as you'll know your squad, but sometimes it's confirmation for what they do. But if you look at the PFF QB rankings heading into this year, they have the elite tier, which is Mahomes, Burrow, Jackson, Josh Allen. I don't think too many of us would disagree. They have the tier 2, Hurts, Daniels, Stafford, Justin Herbert. So they have Stafford in the tier 2. And then in tier 3, they have Goff, Geno Smith, Purdy, Jordan Love, Baker Mayfield, and you get to CJ Stroud, which I think is a little bit silly. Just a little tad bit silly with putting Geno Smith ahead of CJ Stroud. That's kind of ridiculous. I get if you want to put Stafford, but putting Geno Smith above CJ Stroud is just kind of a little bit obnoxious. And that's the embrace debate element of PFF. But the point is, CJ Stroud is heading into his 3rd season. He's about to get paid. A year ago, we were talking about him being in tier 2 and going up to tier 1. Last season didn't go according to plan. Not just his fault. I already know.
Damn it, Bobby.
And the offensive line. So the surroundings around him were not such to where he was going to be able to do his thing. And that was kind of a situation that if you look at Matthew Stafford had to deal with that in Detroit. He was getting roughed up. CJ mentioned that tough play on the NFL films where he had like the separated shoulder. They were a crappy team and he continued to play. He just continued to get roughed up. They continued to make mistakes and eventually he had to go somewhere else. I don't think the Texans are heading that way. And D'Amico Ryans has shown that he's willing to make decisions for CJ Stroud despite success. I mean, he could have justified bringing back the offensive coordinator. He could have justified a lot of things. You win 10 games, you win divisions. A lot of times guys get satisfied with that. Guys who were here not too long ago, they get satisfied with that. But D'Amico has shown that he's willing to make changes for CJ Stroud. But here's my thing. This should be for CJ Stroud, just based on what we've seen, based on what he's shown, and based on what his surroundings are, specifically on defense. And we still don't know about Nick Caley. But this should be the next step for CJ Stroud. He didn't take that next step last year. This should be the year, probably the most important year that he'll ever have in his football career, because this is the year where you're eligible for that big extension, that dream extension, that generational money, which you can make a case. They're already making generational money, but we're talking 400 million, 500 million, whatever the hell quarterbacks are getting paid now. The generational money, 253. I don't know. I don't know how Mulligetta will line this up, but generational money. This is a big year for CJ Stroud, where it's okay to say, I expect him to take the next step. Even if things aren't perfect around him, I expect him to take the next step. The surroundings have changed. CJ Stroud's got to take the next step. I think he would agree with that. I think he would agree with that. And we'll hear from CJ Stroud tomorrow. I'll be on the scene with Cody Stutes. You can hear us both on SNL Monday through Friday, 4:00, right here on YouTube. So the next step is the realistic thing for CJ Stroud to do. And when you look at Matthew Stafford, he's 37. I don't know when he turns 38, but he's pushing 40. He's been beat up for a long time in the NFL. He's getting epidurals for his back during the offseason. This should kind of be the last step for Matthew Stafford. This should kind of be the last step for Matthew Stafford. This is all she wrote, right? Like, this is going to be the end of Matthew Stafford. And he's facing a Texans defense that I don't think many teams would want to face. And many quarterbacks specifically, especially when they're dealing with a bad back. So this should be the last step. And I know there's not a lot. I don't know how many wrestling fans there are in the group. And this wasn't even a time where I was actually watching wrestling. Because the Attitude Era all the way to that. But there's that gif of Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair is just hobbled in the ring. And Shawn Michaels says something like, I love you. And then he knocks his damn block off with the super kick, the sweet chin music. That's kind of what CJ Stroud should be doing to his idol on Sunday, right? Like we should at least, if the Texans are going to get where they want to get, and I know that the surroundings do matter, this should be the time where CJ Stroud looks at Matthew Stafford almost as like somewhat of a lightweight when it comes to handling business against Matthew Stafford. This should be a situation where CJ Stroud just completely separates himself from Matthew Stafford. Give him the sweet chin music and be done with it. Because that's when you're trending up and the guy's trending down, the QB matchup, you're not always going to have that. And there is such a thing as complimentary football. But this has got to be the end for CJ Stroud and Matthew Stafford even being mentioned in the same sentence. Right now you have CJ Stroud and Matthew Stafford, like no matter where the list is, if you go to ESPN Fantasy, like they're both near the 20s. You don't really want them on your fantasy team. If you go to lists like we brought up with PFF, they're in the same tier. CJ Stroud needs to separate himself from Matthew Stafford. Yeah, you have to.